I knew the exact moment I became furniture. It wasn't when they moved my desk next to the server closet to make room for a ping pong table, and it wasn't when the new director of Vibe asked me if I was the IT support for the printer. It was at the Series C celebration dinner. They were popping Dom Perignon like it was tap water, toasting to OmniStream's visionary genius, while the visionary genius, Gavin, stood on a table, soaking wet with champagne, screaming about how he changed the world. I was sitting at the far end of the table, nursing a lukewarm seltzer, watching them celebrate a machine they didn't know how to turn on. See, people think startups are built on dreams and caffeine. They aren't. They're built on paperwork that nobody reads because they're too busy measuring the size of their own dicks in the reflection of a skyscraper. 8 years ago, before the glass offices and the Patagonia vests, was just me and a laptop in a basement that smelled like wet drywall and ambition. I wrote the core, the predictive commerce engine that currently generates 90% of this company's revenue. Gavin provided the pizza and the hype. I provided the logic. Quick side note before I dismantle these people. If you enjoy stories about the quiet person in the back of the room holding the nuclear launch codes, go ahead and hit subscribe button. Maybe drop a like, it keeps the algorithm happy and helps me pay for the good scotch I'm drinking while I type this. Anyway, back to the crime scene. Back then, we were incorporating. Gavin was manic, signing papers without looking, eyes already on the imaginary billions. I was different. I was a postdoc with trust issues and a student loan debt that looked like a phone number. I didn't want equity that could be diluted, I wanted control. So, in the stack of incorporation documents, right between the bylaws and the standard non-competes, I slipped in a single, boring-looking sheet. It was an intellectual property lease agreement. It stated in very plain English that I, Natalie Vance, retained full ownership of the predictive logic source code, V1.0 and all derivatives, and was leasing it to OmniStream Inc. for the generous sum of $1.00 per year. Renewable annually. Terminable by the licensor, me, with 30 days' notice if the lease fee wasn't paid or if the contract wasn't formally renewed. Gavin signed it. He signed it with a flourish, using a Montblanc pen he couldn't afford while talking about disrupting the paradigm. He didn't read it, nobody read it. For 8 years, I paid myself that $1 out of petty cash, filed the receipt, and renewed the lease unilaterally. I was the ghost in the machine. I kept the engine running, patched the holes, and scaled the architecture while Gavin went on podcasts and talked about synergy. But the atmosphere shifted about 6 months ago. The company got too big for its breeches, as my grandmother would say, or operationally mature, as the VCs say. The bro culture went from charmingly chaotic to toxic and corporate. I stopped being the founding engineer and started becoming a liability. I wasn't cool. I didn't play golf. I didn't want to microdose psilocybin at corporate retreats in Joshua Tree. I just wanted to code. I sat there at that Series C dinner, watching Gavin high-five the new VP of sales, a guy who looked like he was manufactured in a lab that specializes in teeth whitening and overconfidence, and I felt a cold calm settle over me. They looked at me and saw a middle-aged woman in a cardigan who helped out in the early days. They didn't realize they were looking at their landlord, and the rent was about to go up. The disconnect was almost funny. They were celebrating the fruit, unaware that I owned the tree, the soil, and the water rights. I went back to the office late that night, not to work, but to check the physical file cabinet. There it was, yellowing slightly, the original lease, Gavin's jagged signature in blue ink. I made a digital copy. Then I made a physical copy. Then I went home, poured a glass of wine, and waited. I knew the storm was coming. I just didn't expect it to arrive wearing a pair of all birds and a fake smile named Marcus. Enter Marcus. He was the new CTO, brought in by the board because the company needed executive polish. Marcus was the kind of guy who used words like ideate, North Star, and scalable verbosity in casual conversation. He had an MBA from somewhere expensive and a GitHub profile that looked like a barren wasteland. He walked into the engineering department on his first day, clapped his hands, and announced, "We're going to pivot to a microservices architecture driven by AI-native frameworks." I literally felt my migraine start behind my left eye. The current architecture was AI-native. I wrote it. It was already microservices. I designed it. Guys like Marcus don't actually look at the code, they look at the buzzwords. He called me into his office on Tuesday. It was one of those glass fish bowls where everyone can see you getting fired. He didn't offer me a seat. He sat on the edge of his desk, swinging a leg, trying to look casual and authoritative at the same time. "Natalie, hey, great work on the legacy stuff," he said. Legacy stuff. The code was running live transactions at 50 milliseconds latency. It wasn't legacy, it was the nervous system of the company. "Listen, we're bringing in a new team to handle the Omni 2.0 build. We need fresh eyes, younger energy, you know how it is." "I wrote the core, Marcus," I said, keeping my voice flat. "If you change the data ingestion pipeline, you'll break the predictive models. The client historicals won't map." He waved a hand dismissively, like he was swatting away a fly. "That's why we need you to transition to an advisory role. We want you to document everything. Write down the tribal knowledge. Hand over the keys to the castle so the new rock stars can drive. We're thinking, head of legacy maintenance? It's a vital role. Head of legacy maintenance. It was corporate speak for janitor. He wanted me to write the manual for my own replacement, then sit in a corner and fix bugs while he took credit for modernizing the stack. I looked at him. I looked at his perfectly coiffed hair and his expensive watch that probably cost more than my first car. He thought he was demoting me. He thought he was putting the old horse out to pasture. He had no idea he was talking to the owner of the pasture. I understand, I said. You want full documentation of the IP and a handover of all administrative access. Exactly, he beamed, thinking I was rolling over. Team player. Love it. Need a few weeks to organize the files, I lied. There's a lot of historical context. Take your time, he said, checking his phone. Just make sure the new guys have root access by Friday. I walked out of that office, and for the first time in years, I felt alive. Not happy alive. It's the feeling you get when you're playing poker and you look down to see 4 aces, and the guy across from you just shoved his house keys into the pot. I went back to my desk and started documenting. But I wasn't writing tutorials, I was auditing. I pulled the logs for the last 8 years. I downloaded the commit histories. I found every single instance where Gavin, Marcus, or the previous CTOs had claimed my code was proprietary company technology in emails to investors. I built a dossier. Then I went to the legal filing cabinet again. I checked the dates. The annual lease renewal was due on October 1st. It was currently October 15th. They had missed the payment. They had missed the renewal window. Technically, as of 2 weeks ago, OmniStream Inc. was operating on stolen property. I didn't say a word. I just kept typing, smiling at the juniors who looked at me with pity. Oh, look at poor Natalie, she's washing out. I wasn't washing out. I was waiting for the tide to turn so I could drown them. The thing about incompetence is that it leaves a trail. Smart people cover their tracks. Idiots just assume no one is looking. Marcus was an idiot. While I was supposedly documenting legacy systems, I was actually deep diving into the company's sales contracts. I had admin access to everything. Nobody had thought to revoke it yet because, again, I was just furniture. I found a folder marked Project Titan. It was a contract with the largest retail conglomerate in North America. We're talking a $200 million deal. The pilot program was set to launch in 3 weeks. I read the technical specs promised to the client. Proprietary predictive behavioral modeling, real-time inventory adaptation, customized user intent algorithms. They were selling my code, not just using it. They were white-labeling it and selling it as a standalone product to a third party. I checked the IP clauses in the client contract. OmniStream warranted that it had full and exclusive ownership of all underlying technology. That was a lie. A multi-million-dollar lie. If I pulled the license, OmniStream wouldn't just lose the deal. They would be in breach of contract for fraud. They would be sued into a crater in the ground. I needed to be sure. I spent the weekend running diffs, comparisons between the code I wrote in my basement 8 years ago and the code currently running on the Titan servers. It was a 98% match. They hadn't even refactored the variable names. I found comments I'd written in 2015, jokes about my cat, reminders to buy milk, still embedded in the deep logic of the neural net. They hadn't rewritten anything. Marcus's new architecture was just a fancy API wrapper slapped on top of my engine. It was like putting a spoiler on a Honda Civic and selling it as a Ferrari. I called a lawyer I knew from grad school, a shark named Alina who specialized in IP litigation. We met at a dive bar in Somerville, far away from the innovation district. I slid the folder across the sticky table. Tell me I'm crazy, I said. Alina read the lease. She read the Titan contract. She read the missed renewal notice. She started laughing. It was a terrifying sound. Natalie, she said, wiping tears from her eyes, this isn't a lawsuit. This is an execution. You own the foundation of a unicorn, and they just forgot to pay the rent. What's the play? I asked. Silence, she said. Let them dig the hole deeper. Let them launch the pilot. Let them take the investor money. The more they rely on your IP, the more leverage you have. You need to officially record the assignment in your name just to be safe, but keep it quiet. When the time comes, we don't send a letter, we send a bomb. I went back to work on Monday with a spring in my step. Marcus stopped by my desk. How's that documentation coming, Nat? We really need to sunset your access soon. Almost done, I chirped, just making sure every line of code is properly attributed. Wouldn't want any confusion later. Great, he said. Distracted? By the way, can you fix the latency on the Titan server? It's lagging. I smiled. I'd love to, Marcus, but that sounds like a job for the new architecture. He scowled and walked away. I put my headphones on and listened to a podcast about heavy metal history. The Titan server wasn't lagging because of code. It was lagging because I had throttled the processing power by 5%. Just a little tug on the leash. A reminder that the dog doesn't walk the master. The betrayal wasn't just financial. It was existential. Wednesday afternoon, I was in the break room making a coffee. The espresso machine was broken, of course, because the Office Vibe manager didn't know how to descale it when Jason walked in. Jason was a junior dev, a sweet kid fresh out of MIT who still had that look of hope in his eyes. It was one of the few people who actually asked me questions about the code base instead of just copying and pasting from Stack Overflow. "Hey, Natalie," he said, looking around nervously to make sure we were alone. "Can I ask you something weird?" "Shoot," I said, stirring powdered creamer into my sludge. "In the all-hands engineering meeting this morning, Marcus showed us the core prediction module. He said he wrote the base logic during a hackathon last weekend. But I saw the timestamps and the syntax style. It looks exactly like your old commits." My blood ran cold, then it boiled. Marcus wasn't just pushing me out, he was plagiarizing me in real time. He was claiming authorship of my life's work to a room full of 20-year-olds who didn't know any better. "He said that?" I asked, my voice dangerously quiet. "Yeah." He said he refactored the clumsy legacy logic into a streamlined heuristic. But I looked at the code. "Natalie," he just renamed the variables. He changed user velocity to customer journey speed and called it a day. "Clumsy legacy logic," I repeated. That clumsy logic was currently processing $3 million of transactions an hour. "I just thought you should know," Jason said, grabbing a la croix. It didn't sit right with me. "Thanks, Jason," I said. "Keep your head down. Don't say anything to him. Are you going to do something?" "I'm handling it." I went back to my desk. That was the final nail. It wasn't enough to just get paid anymore. I wanted them humiliated. I wanted Marcus to stand in front of that whiteboard and explain why his streamlined heuristic had suddenly evaporated. I messaged Alina. "They're claiming authorship internally. Fraud is now systemic." She replied instantly, "Good. We have the investor diligence request coming up. The Series D funding round opens next week. They have to disclose all IP ownership." This was the trap. The Series D investors were Goldman Sachs types, suits who didn't care about vibes but cared very deeply about liability. They would send a questionnaire asking, "Does the company own 100% of the IP?" If Gavin and Marcus answered yes, they were committing securities fraud. If they answered no, they lost the funding. They would answer yes. I knew they would. They were arrogant. They thought I was a nobody. They thought the paper I signed 8 years ago was just trash. I spent the rest of the week cleaning up my files. I wasn't cleaning. I was removing every single comment that explained how the code worked. I stripped the documentation. I obfuscated the variable names in my local versions. I was turning the crystal clear engine into a black box that only I had the key to unlock. If they wanted to drive the car, they better hope nothing breaks, because I was about to cut the brake lines. The invite for the board meeting appeared on the shared calendar, then immediately disappeared. They had hidden it. Strategic Review and Series Definalization Board only. They were going to close the funding round, secure the $50 million, and then fire me. That was the play. They probably had the severance package drafted already, 2 weeks' pay and a non-disparagement agreement. I didn't wait for an invite. As a founding shareholder, even though my equity had been diluted to fractions, I had a statutory right to attend annual meetings, but this was a special session. However, my lease agreement had a clause. The licensor reserves the right to audit usage and compliance at any time upon reasonable notice. I printed the notice. I walked over to Gavin's executive assistant, a terrified girl named Brittany who spent 90% of her day returning Gavin's Amazon packages. "Brittany, please add me to the agenda for the Tuesday board meeting," I said, handing her a hard copy of the request. She looked pale. "Oh, Natalie, I think that's executives only." Gavin was pretty specific. "It's an IP compliance audit," I said, using the magic words. "If I'm not on the agenda, Series D diligence fails automatically because of outstanding legal queries." That scared her. She didn't know what it meant, but it sounded expensive. She added me. Gavin stormed over to my desk 10 minutes later. He smelled like stress and expensive cologne. "Natalie, what is this? We're trying to close a deal here. We don't need the engineering team cluttering up the boardroom." "It's just a formality, Gavin," I said, not looking up from my monitor. "I need to clarify the IP assignment status for the investors. You know how sticky these lawyers get about the founding code stuff. Better to have me there to nod and say yes, it's all yours so you get the check, right?" He paused. He was greedy and his greed made him stupid. He thought I was offering to help him lie. He thought I was finally falling in line to secure his money. "Fine," he snapped. 5 minutes. You come in, you confirm the tech stack is stable and proprietary. And then you leave, no technical details, just the broad strokes. Broad strokes, I agreed, got it. The weekend passed in a blur. I didn't sleep. I prepared a slide deck. It was 3 slides long. Slide 1, the lease agreement 2015. Slide 2, the missed payment/non-renewal notice 2023. Slide 3, the Titan contract usage violation fees. Alina calculated the damages. Based on the unauthorized usage for the Titan pilot and the white labeling of the IP, plus the statutory damages for copyright infringement, the number was bigger than the Series D investment. I ironed my best blazer. I drank a kale smoothie which tasted like lawn clippings, but I needed the vitamins. I felt like a gladiator walking into the Colosseum, except my sword was a PDF and my shield was a thumb drive. The boardroom had a view of the Charles River. The table was mahogany, long enough to land a plane on. Around it sat the board of directors, Gavin, Marcus, two VC partners from Sand Hill Road who were checking their emails, and a corporate attorney named Teffin with a PH who looked bored. When I walked in, nobody stood up. Gavin gestured vaguely to a chair in the corner away from the table. This is Natalie, our legacy engineer. She's just here to sign off on the IP diligence. One of the VCs, guy in a fleece vest, looked at me over his glasses. So you built the original stack? I did, I said, remaining standing. I walked to the head of the table right next to Gavin. Great, the VC said, and we own all that, right? Standard assignment of inventions? Gavin nodded vigorously. 100% ironclad. Actually, I said, my voice cutting through the air conditioning hum. That's not accurate. The room went silent. Kind of silence you hear right before a car crash. Excuse me? Gavin laughed nervously. Natalie, don't confuse them with technicalities. It's not a technicality, Gavin, it's a lease. I plugged my laptop into the HDMI cable. The screen flickered to life. Slide 1, Intellectual Property Lease Agreement. Lesser, Natalie Vance. Lessee, Omnistream Inc. Status, expired. What the hell is this? Marcus stood up. This is a joke. 8 years ago, I said, dressing the VCs, ignoring Gavin completely. I retained ownership of the algorithm. OmniStream has been leasing it from me for $1 a year. It was a standard protect your ass maneuver. Gavin signed it. I clicked to the next slide. A blown-up image of Gavin's signature. We have an assignment of inventions clause in your employment contract. Stephen, the lawyer, barked, finally looking awake. Dated after incorporation, I corrected. This lease predates my employment contract. The IP was created prior to the entity's formation. It is excluded property, licensed back to the company. Check your due diligence file, Stephen. It's in there, you just didn't read it. Stephen started frantically typing on his laptop. His face went from bored to beet red in about 6 seconds. He looked at Gavin. Is this? Did you sign this? I sign 1,000 things. Gavin sputtered. It doesn't matter. It's our code. She works for us. I worked for you, I said. But the lease expired on October 1st. You failed to renew. You also failed to pay the $1 fee. Per the contract terms, the license has terminated. All usage of the predictive engine as of 14 days ago is unauthorized. I clicked to the final slide. Unauthorized usage. Project Titan. Estimated damages, $150,000 per violation. You are currently deploying unlicensed software to your largest client, I said, leaning on the table. You are selling property you do not own. If I make one phone call to the Titan legal team, this contract and this company evaporates. Gavin looked like he was having a stroke. Marcus looked like he was about to cry. The VCs just looked at me with a sudden, terrifying respect. What do you want? The VC in the fleece vest asked quietly. You built this company? Gavin screamed, slamming his hand on the table. You're just a coder. You're a mechanic. You don't understand business. I understand that you're squatting in my house, I replied calmly. And I'm changing the locks. We'll sue you, Marcus squeaked. We'll bury you in legal fees. With what money? I asked. The Series D isn't closed. And if these gentlemen, I nodded at the VCs, walk out that door, you can't even make payroll next week. And they will walk out. Because no one invests in a software company that doesn't own its software. The VC raised a hand, silencing Marcus. He looked at Stephen, the lawyer. Is she right? Stephen loosened his tie. He looked like a man who was visualizing his own malpractice insurance premiums. If the lease is valid, and it looks valid, and if it expired, yes, she owns the core IP. Without a new license, we are dead in the water. The room temperature dropped 10 degrees. VCs turned their cold, reptilian eyes toward Gavin. They didn't care about his vision anymore. He was a liability. Natalie, the VC said, his voice smooth as silk. Let's all take a breath. Obviously, there has been an oversight. We value your contribution. We can fix this. A retroactive renewal? A lump sum bonus we can offer you? I don't know, $50,000 and some stock options to sign a full assignment transfer today. I laughed. It was a genuine belly laugh. 50,000? You're raising 50 million on a valuation of 400 million, and you're offering me the price of a used Camry? What is your number? Gavin hissed. I don't want a number, I said, and I don't want to work here anymore. I don't want to report to Marcus, who thinks refactoring means renaming my variables. I slid a new document across the table. Alina had drafted it that morning. This is a licensing agreement. It structures a new entity, Vance Logic LLC, which I own 100%. OmniStream will pay a licensing fee of 15% of all gross revenue derived from the predictive engine. That includes the Titan deal. And the license is revocable if any attempt is made to reverse engineer the code. 15% of gross? Gavin's eyes bulged. That wipes out our margin. That kills the profitability. Then write your own code, I said. Have Marcus do it. He's a rock star, right? Give him a keyboard. I'll turn off my engine and he can build a new one by tomorrow morning before the Titan pilot launches. I looked at Marcus. He shrank into his chair. He knew he couldn't code Hello World without a tutorial, let alone a predictive commerce engine. We can't rebuild it in time, Stephen whispered. Titan launches in 48 hours. Then you pay the rent, I said. It took them 45 minutes to break. Gavin tried to bluster. He tried to threaten. He tried to appeal to loyalty and the family we built. We aren't a family, Gavin, I told him. We are a corporation, and I am the supplier. The price of steel just went up. The VCs made the call. They weren't going to let the $200 million Titan deal collapse over a founder's ego. They forced Gavin to sign. The ink wasn't even dry when the restructuring began. The VCs, realizing that the current management team had effectively jeopardized the entire company's existence through negligence, called for an immediate executive session. I packed up my laptop while they were still arguing. As I walked out, Marcus tried to catch my eye. He looked like a child who had lost his mother at the grocery store. I didn't acknowledge him. I walked past the glass offices, past the ping pong table, past the hang in their cat poster. I went to my desk. I didn't pack a box. I didn't take the stapler or the framed photo of my dog. I just took my hard drive. Brittany, the assistant, was crying at her desk. She could sense the bad vibes radiating from the boardroom. Is everything okay, Natalie? Everything is great, Brittany, I said. By the way, tell Gavin he's out of toner. I walked out of the building and into the Cambridge air. It was cold and smelled like exhaust and river water. It smelled like freedom. By the time I got home, my phone was blowing up, emails from the board. They had fired Marcus, effective immediately, gross incompetence. They were keeping Gavin on as a figurehead for now, but he was being stripped of operational control. They wanted to know if I would come back as CTO. I replied with 2 words, "C agreement." I wasn't coming back. I didn't need to. I was now their largest creditor. Every time they sold a subscription, every time the Titan algorithm predicted a customer wanted a pair of sneakers, a check was generated for Vance Logic LLC. They were doing the work. They were handling the sales, the marketing, the HR headaches, the culture. And I was skimming the cream off the top. 3 months later, I'm sitting in my new home office. It's quiet. No open plans. No espresso machines making noises like dying whales. Just me and my monitors. OmniStream closed their Series D. They got their money. But the valuation was slashed because of the significant IP licensing liability on their books. Gavin is still the CEO on LinkedIn, but I hear he spends most of his time networking because the board won't let him touch anything important. The Titan pilot was a massive success. The algorithm worked perfectly. Of course it did. I wrote it. My first quarterly licensing check arrived yesterday. It was for an obscene amount of money. Enough to buy a very nice house or perhaps a small island where LinkedIn is banned. I ran into Jason, the junior dev, at a coffee shop last week. He told me the vibe at the office is funeral somber. They're terrified of touching the code now. They treat the black box like a holy relic. If it bugs out, they don't try to fix it. They call my consultancy firm, and I charge them $500 an hour to look at it. Marcus is apparently working at a crypto startup now. His bio says he's a visionary architect. God help them. People always say, don't burn bridges. That's bad advice. Sometimes you have to burn the bridge to show people that they were standing on it only because you let them. They thought I was the help. They thought I was the invisible woman who kept the lights on. They forgot that if you control the power grid, you can turn off the sun. I took the check to the bank. The teller asked me what I do for a living. I'm in real estate, I told her. Oh, selling houses? No, I smiled. I rent out logic to people who don't have any. I went home, poured a glass of the really expensive scotch, the kind that tastes like peat moss and victory, and sat down to code. Not for OmniStream, for me. I have a new idea. It's a predictive model for detecting corporate fraud. I think Gavin is going to be my first beta tester. Cheers.